Hello, everybody. Welcome to our new virtual classroom for 19th century philosophy. This week, we're going to be talking about Anna Julia Cooper and her book, A Voice from the South. Some background on Cooper. She was an educator, author, activist, and one of the most prominent African-American scholars in United States history. She gave voice to the African-American community during the 19th and 20th centuries, and from the end of the slavery to the beginning of the civil rights movement. Cooper, who once described her vocation as the education of neglected people, viewed learning as a means of true liberation. So for her, education is sort of a big theme that comes up throughout her writings. She's best known for her educational leadership, her challenges to the racist notion that African Americans were naturally inferior, and a groundbreaking collection of essays and speeches called A Voice from the South by a Black woman of the South, which is what we are actually reading selections from for class. Cooper was born into slavery around 1858 in Raleigh, North Carolina. As a child, she developed a love of learning and wanted to become a teacher. In 1868, she received a scholarship to St. Augustine's Normal School and Collegiate Institute, now St. Augustine's College, a school created by the local Episcopal diocese for the purpose of training teachers to educate former slaves and their families. During her years at St. Augustine, she distinguished herself as a bright and ambitious student. At St. Augustine's, Cooper fought for her right to take courses such as Greek, which were reserved for men, by demonstrating her scholastic ability. In 1879, Cooper enrolled in Oberlin College in Ohio. In 1884, she graduated with a degree in mathematics, becoming one of the first African-American women to graduate from the school. Cooper returned to Raleigh and taught math, Greek, Latin at St. Augustine's until 1887, when she was invited to teach math and science at the Preparatory High School for Colored Youth in Washington, D.C., the largest and most prestigious public high school for African Americans in the nation. In 1892, Cooper published A Voice from the South by a Black woman of the South, the first book-length volume of Black feminist analysis in the United States. Cooper explored a variety of topics, including race relations, poverty, and gender inequality. She encouraged the African American community to take advantage of education. Well received by Black and white critics alike, the collection was regarded as one of the most readable books on the race question of the South, so she was well received. Cooper studied French literature and history for several years before enrolling as a doctoral student at Columbia University in 1914, while also remaining a full-time teacher. In 1924, Cooper transferred to the University of Paris Sorbonne in France, and in 1925 successfully defended her doctoral dissertation. She was only the fourth African-American woman in the U.S. to earn a PhD, and the first Black woman to do from any country to do so at the Sorbonne, or at the university that she graduated from. So the book that we're actually reading passages from, again, is called A Voice from the South. It's her best-known work, and it was published in 1892. The collection of essays and speeches is described by Mary Helen Washington as an unparalleled articulation of Black feminist thought. The text emphasizes the import of a woman's voice and her unique contributions, while at the same time highlighting the racialization of gender and the sexualization of race. So here's some key themes from the book. One of the biggest key themes is this idea of intersectionality. Cooper examines the interlocking systems of race, gender, and class oppression, explicitly articulating how Black women are simultaneously impacted by racism and sexism. Cooper argues that Black women have a unique epistemological standpoint. And epistemological means sort of like the way that they sort of have knowledge about the world. So they have a unique sort of standpoint of knowledge about the world from which to observe society and its oppressive systems, as well as a unique ethical contribution to make in confronting and correcting these oppressive systems. So in a way, Cooper is really a forerunner for this notion of intersectionality, which has become a much more of a key term nowadays. The term was coined more recently by a woman named Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a lawyer, who wrote a term about how race and sex intersect and it's that place of intersection that's interesting to her. But we can see Cooper as a forerunner of this type of thinking. Other central themes from the book include the importance of education and intellectual development, the necessity of respecting difference, and the special contribution that each racial group makes for human progress, an economic, materialist, and existential conceptualization of value or worth, and a theory of truth. So she has a lot of different aspects to her thinking. So the first essay that I've asked you, or chapter from the book that I've asked you to read, is called Woman versus the Indian. In this chapter, Cooper argues for the inherent rights of all people, or what she calls the rights of humanity, by specifying groups typically denied these rights. These groups would include blacks, women, Indians, Native Americans, and the poor. Cooper, much like Rosa Luxemburg, who we discussed earlier this semester, is critical of both black men for their sexism and white women's racism, particularly the racism expressed by white women's organizations that claim to be tackling the oppression of all women. Cooper challenges the tendency in the white women's movement to fight for white women's rights at the expense of or instead of others' rights. So there's this idea in the women's movement that white women were speaking for all women when they were really just speaking for themselves. They weren't thinking about the plight of black women or Native American women. Cooper, in her writing, takes a strong stand against all forms of oppression. I thought this quote summed it up nicely. Woman should not, even by inference or for the sake of argument, seem to disparage what is weak. For woman's cause is the cause of the weak. And when all the weak shall have received their due consideration, then woman will have her rights. And the Indian will have his rights, and the Negro will have his rights, and all the strong will have learned at last to deal justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. For Cooper, it is necessary to reject and speak out against all forms of oppressions. She asks, or she petitions, it is not the intelligent woman versus the ignorant woman, nor the white woman versus the black, the brown, and the red. It is not even the cause of woman versus man. Woman's strongest vindication for speaking is that the world needs to hear her voice. When race, color, sex, condition are realized to be accidents, not the substance of life, then woman's lesson is taught and woman's lesson is won. Not the white woman, not the black woman, nor the red woman, but the cause of every man or woman who has writhed silently under a mighty wrong. So here in this quote, we can see Cooper pleading the case, the cause of every man and woman who is wronged, rejecting oppression against the ignorant, various races, and women. That's it for our video.